Well, hey everyone, Wayne Fox back with another video. I just got back from St. George. Voice is a little weird today, sorry. And I found this. Orico asked if I would be interested in reviewing some of their products, and they offered to send me this Thunderbolt 4 dock. And I said, sure, I'll be glad to review those. I enjoy making these kind of videos. So you might ask yourself, why would I want to review a Thunderbolt 4 dock? Thunderbolt 5 is kind of the hot thing right now. Let's get this one open, check what it's got, and then I'll talk about that. Okay, let's get this thing open and check it out. Silver color is nice. Most docks have gone to a little darker gray nowadays, but no big deal. Let's just see what else is in the box real quick. We have a connection cable, a power supply. See if we can read the wattage on that. And I can't read that. Let me put my glasses on. So this says it's 130 watts. Okay, well, let's just take a look at the ports. On the front of the device, we have a power button. Unusual for a Thunderbolt 4 device. I've never tested one that has it. Most of the Thunderbolt 5 devices actually do have one. We have the upstream connection to the computer here. And I've said this with any other dock that puts this port in the front. I can't let it go here. This port should be on the back. You do not need access to it. You plug a cable into it, and the other end is what you plug in and out from your laptop, or it's permanently plugged into another one. So better design, I think, is putting on the back, and most dock makers have started moving those to the back. I would hope that Orico, when they're coming out with the next dock. Now, I will say it's not a real big deal, and it's certainly not a reason to not buy the device. I think that in this case, it's kind of nice because you could put a right angle Thunderbolt 4 cable like this on it, because there's nothing next to it that cable would block. So, that wouldn't be too bad of a solution. And maybe it's in a place where you wouldn't care about that cable coming out of the front anyway, but it should be on the back. It supplies 85 watts of charging power. So 85 watts does sound weak if you're comparing it to Thunderbolt 5 docks, which typically they deliver about 140 watts. But Thunderbolt 4 docks at best can deliver 100 watts. So 85 is close enough. I don't think you'll see any difference. It's more than enough to keep your computer charged. The downstream port, which means it just passes it through, has 15 watts of power. And this is one area where we see the dock might be a little weak. And I'll mention, and I'll talk about this later, I think it's because it's designed to be a more affordable option. Most Thunderbolt 4 ports have multiple downstream ports. This only has one. Doesn't limit your total number of devices as long as your device is daisy chain. If you're only going to have one, I actually would put it on the back as well, because it's probably going to be permanently connected to some external storage or some device, and you really don't need access to it. Again, not a big deal. We have two USB 10 gigabit per second ports. So both these ports are USB 3.2 Gen 2, 10 gigabit per second. I think this is a great feature. I think all docks should have both a USB-A and a USB-C connection on the front to the USB bus, and I really like this feature. Now, one thing I couldn't find out is what the power delivery of these was. I'm going to assume it's 7.5 watts because that's pretty standard, and there's plenty of power left in that power supply that I think that they would have no problem doing that. I'm going to find out from Orico, and if it's anything different than that, I will pin a comment in the below. But I found they could charge the device. I plugged in some AirPods, and it seemed to charge it just fine. And then we have the normal audio in and out combined port here. Let's flip it over. And on the back, we notice that we have the power in port here. We have a display port, which is DisplayPort 1.4. We have HDMI, which is HDMI 2.0. So the fact that it has two connections for displays kind of negates the fact that it only has one downstream Thunderbolt port, because most of the time, if you're trying to hook a couple of displays up to your dock, which is typically what a lot of people do, if you hook up two displays to a normal Thunderbolt 4 dock with three Thunderbolt connections, you still only have one downstream left. So basically, they've opted to put in dedicated ports to the displays, and not a bad choice. The HDMI port will handle up to 8K at 30 hertz, and the display port will handle up to 4K at 240 hertz, which means I think it should handle a 6K at maybe 120 or something like that. So not a bad option here. We have a 1 gigabit Ethernet port. In deciding if you're buying a dock, this may be a factor. A lot of people, the Ethernet connection doesn't matter. A lot of them don't even use it. But if you're in a network environment which has 2.5, 5, or even 10 gig Ethernet, then a little bit of an issue. Now, one thing you can do is you can buy a dedicated Ethernet adapter, plug it into a different port on your computer if you need that higher speed. And that might be a fairly good alternative because this is a pretty reasonably priced dock, as we'll see in a minute. We have two USB 2 ports, mainly for things like mice and keyboard. Now that is a little disappointing that I don't have a USB 3.2 port on the back with that higher speed. I'm surprised, to be honest. I don't have a real problem with USB 2 ports being there. I don't see a lot of use in them. I think that there's not much left, if anything, that can't work off of a USB 3.2 port. Let's be honest, USB 3 was introduced in 2008, and I wouldn't have a problem with these other than the fact that I don't have a 10 gigabit per second port on the back, which I think every dock should have. But it still might be useful, and these ports certainly can support plenty of things. There's a lot of stuff. 480 megabytes a second is more than enough speed other than keyboard and mice. For example, the dongle for my Logitech mouse works fine in that. Just thought I'd mention that, though. I would love to have at least 1 or 2 USB 3.2 ports on the back, especially if you're going to have them on the front as well. Interestingly enough, we have a SD 3.0 slot. Most are 4.0 nowadays, as well as micro SDs. Now, I'll be honest, I find this placement on the back a little odd. Actually getting around back there to plug in a micro SD, or TF, I guess they're called, would be a little bit awkward. And I think it would be perfect sense if you could put those on the front and move those Thunderbolt ports to the back. That would be more logical. Maybe not a big deal. I don't know how many people use the SD card slot anyway. Now, it is an SD 3.0, so it will perform slower with quite a few cards than a SD 4.0 slot. And if you do a lot of reading of data off of the card, it's something you might consider. Now, a lot of times you've got multiple card readers at your disposal. Seems like every device you hook up, including your computer's got one in it. Most of the people have an SD card reader right in their computer, which is fast enough. And so might not be a big deal that it's only 3.0. I thought I would go ahead and talk about why Thunderbolt 4. Thunderbolt 4's got a lot of leg left to it. You know, we've got a lot of Macs still have Thunderbolt 4, and even though the next year to 2 years they'll all have Thunderbolt 5, there's still going to be a lot of Thunderbolt 4 computers out there. I mean, most Macs survive 5 to 7 years at least, and Windows is probably not a lot different. There's probably a lot of Thunderbolt 4. And Thunderbolt 5, even though it's been on a few Windows computers longer, I still don't think it's nearly as commonplace. So Thunderbolt 4 docks will still have some use, and especially one like this where it's a little more affordable and it might offer just what you need. Okay, so if I compare this to a lot of other docks, you might initially think it seems kind of underpowered, maybe not enough ports. But once you look at it, it might actually be a good choice for some people, and that's kind of what I say about all docks. Analyze what you need, what the device has, and you might find a good fit. Doesn't offer as many ports and things like that, but it might have plenty for what you need. This is actually a really affordable dock, and I think that's kind of been one of the focuses. Right now, I just went on Amazon to see, and between the two discounts that are available, I could get this for $187, which is considerably less than most Thunderbolt 4 docks. Obviously, if you need a lot more expandability, something like the TS4 might be an option, but now you're talking over $300. And if your main focus is a couple of displays and a few other things, this could be a good choice. And I think that right now, even if the Amazon discount disappears, I have a discount code that Orico gave me. So I think you're going to be able to get at least a 20% discount no matter when you buy it. So one thing I found a little strange is the cable that comes with it is not labeled. Now, a Thunderbolt 4 certified cable usually has the lightning bolt logo and the number 4, the Intel mark, and that means that Intel certified it as a Thunderbolt 4 cable. The device itself is certified. Intel controls the group that certifies that. And I thought, well, does it really work? And I thought, well, maybe I should test this. So real quick, let's just check it out. We're going to go ahead and hook this cable up to a Thunderbolt 5 SSD. and connect it to my Mac and just see what kind of speed we get compared to an actual certified Thunderbolt cable. Let's just take a look at that real quick. And as you can see, I'm getting pretty much identical results, nearly 6,000 megabytes a second write, 58 to 5900 read from the Intel certified cable as well as the Orico one. So even though it's not labeled and certified, it does seem to be able to handle the bandwidth. I mean, it's handling Thunderbolt 5 just fine as well. And so Thunderbolt 4 should be fine. So one thing I've decided is with these docks nowadays, a lot of them in the past I've bought and I've used personally for extended time before I've done a review. Some of the docks, like this one's been sent to me to review by Orico, and I'm not planning on using it full time because I've got other docks I think for my case are more suited. I'm not sure if they're going to want me to send it back or not. I'll be happy to if they want. But I thought, I actually need to hook it up and put it through its paces, because sometimes a dock, once you start using it, there are some issues. And, even with some people, they have an issue and other people don't. So anyway, I'm going to hook this thing up. As you can see here, I've got it hooked up. I've got two displays hooked up. One is a 4K 60 hertz and the other is a 4K 144 hertz. I've got a USB 3.0 hub hooked to one of the ports on the front with at least 7 devices in it, including an Insta360 Link 2 camera, which I'm going to pull some 4K video capture off of. I've got a Thunderbolt 5 SSD connected to the front. I've got my keyboard connected, my little dongle connected to the back. And so I'm going to use this for 3 or 4 days and make sure it works okay. And I'm also going to run some tests just to give an idea of the speed that we might see and make sure that the dock doesn't have something going on that maybe would be a concern. So I'll be back in 3 or 4 days once I've actually put it through its paces and kind of wrap this video up. Well, okay, I've had the dock hooked up for 3 days now, used it exclusively. I've tested it with quite a few things. Now, one of my hobbies is World of Warcraft, and that pushes the computer pretty hard because I do run it at 144 hertz to get the fast frame rate, and my Mac fans spin up pretty hard. It really pushes the graphics. And I will say that both my 4K 144 and my 4K 60 displays ran flawlessly. I didn't see any issues, no drops, no blacks, nothing like that at all. One thing I have noticed with some docks is my one display here, when I wake my computer up, it won't sense it, and I've got to turn it off and back on. And I didn't have that problem with the Orico dock. I have it actually with the current CalDigit Thunderbolt 5 hub, and it's not a big deal. It's not a real problem. It might be a setting in the actual display. Now, the USB hub that I connected, it's a powered hub, and I had no problem with bandwidth there either. The Instalink 360 camera, pull 4K video off of that just fine. All my devices, my printers and everything. Most USB devices don't need a lot of bandwidth, and so that worked just great. In fact, even that 480 megabyte per second ports out of the back, they're probably more than enough for things like printers. So as far as I'm concerned, it worked great. It's reliable. It does get warm, but they all do. And I never thought it got excessively warm to the touch. A lot of people, they think something that's fairly hot is too hot, but bottom line is that's kind of how electronics are. Now, one thing I thought I would do to finish the video is run a bunch of tests to compare this dock's performance with Thunderbolt storage. When you start adding displays, you really take a lot of bandwidth, and the speed to write to your external SSDs can be hampered quite a bit. And I thought, well, I'll just run these and make sure it's not anything excessively worse than other ones. So let me show you those real quick. This is more just to alert you to the fact that if you're going to hook a couple of displays to a dock and you really want good speed out of your Thunderbolt SSDs, there's an issue there. And this is common with all docks. And I'll preface this by saying this dock performed pretty much identically to all the other Thunderbolt docks that I've used, the Thunderbolt 4 docks, as far as how the speed loss to those SSDs. Anyway, let's just do some quick speed tests and then we'll wrap this thing up. So the first thing I ran a test on, just to make sure that Ethernet port maintained the right speed. I did use the Ethernet on this quite a bit, even though it is less slower than my network. I have a 2 gig connection to the internet, so 1 gig is not quite fast enough for me personally. But as you can see here, running the test on this, I was able to get pretty much what you'd expect out of a 1 gig Ethernet connection. And as I said before, for a lot of people, that's more than enough. You'll just have to decide for yourself when you're choosing a dock what you actually need. So So the last thing I thought I would test is just to make sure that the Thunderbolt 4 downstream port doesn't really suffer speed disadvantages worse than other Thunderbolt 4 docks. As you'll see as I go through the test, as you connect displays and as you increase the bandwidth to the displays, the throughput to the write speed of your Thunderbolt 4 devices, or Thunderbolt 5 devices for that matter, will suffer a little bit. So this is more just to educate you on that's an overall problem with Thunderbolt 4 docks. I did a whole video about that a while ago, and that is one advantage of Thunderbolt 5. You've got double the bandwidth. So with Thunderbolt 4 devices, for example, your SSD speeds, you don't see a hit at all. So in this first test, we've connected the SSD to the dock with no displays attached. And you can see I'm getting 2,800 megabytes a second write and read speed, and that's pretty typical. That's pretty much the fastest I've seen any connected device through a dock obtained. Now, some devices like some USB 4 devices can get up to 3,600 megabytes a second if you connect them directly to the Mac. But once you go to any dock, I've never seen one go more than about 2,800. Just seems to be a limitation of the docks themselves. So here you can see now I've connected one 4K display. It's running at 60 hertz, and I see a write speed hit of about 800 megabytes a second. This is actually very typical. Pretty much every Thunderbolt 4 dock does this. In fact, I think every one I've ever tested does. And that's just because the bandwidth required for that display means you have a little bit less bandwidth available for that Thunderbolt 4 port. Let's connect another 4K display and see what happens. And here you can see that we again lose some write speed. Now we're down to about 1,500 megabytes a second. And again, that's quite typical, two 4K displays. Now, if you have one that's only a 2K display, you won't see quite as big a hit. But let's see what happens if we crank that second display up to 144 hertz. So as you can see, once I change that display from 60 to 144 hertz, it drops all the way down to below USB 3.2 speed. And that's pretty much what you're going to see with every Thunderbolt 4 and even Thunderbolt 3 dock. There just isn't enough bandwidth in that 40 gigabits per second speed to drive those displays and have enough left to send data to those SSDs. Now, I will say that that's still fast. There's not many people that need speeds faster than that. You need to write to those. Read speeds are still great, and a lot of times the read speed in a lot of applications, that's actually the one that's important, and we don't see a hit in those. So the real issue is, what do you need to connect to your dock? Are the ports adequate? I think it's pretty safe to say you can buy a pretty affordable USB 3 dock to plug into that port if you have a lot of low bandwidth devices like printers, things like that. And I think that for a lot of people, this might be just the ticket. You need to decide what you need. If you need a lot more connectivity, then you might opt for a different dock, which will cost quite a bit more money. I do like this Orico dock. I think for some people it could be a real good solution for the price, and hopefully my review's been helpful in that anyway. I would say that I wish the makers of these docks would, and the engineering team would, at least talk to people like me and even other influencers, even more notable than I am, about the feature set, because I think that maybe they don't understand in practical everyday use how people are using it. That's why maybe, Thunderbolt ports on the back, down upstream port, SD card slots in the front, just makes a lot of sense. Might be too late. They've got a Thunderbolt 5 dock coming out, and I don't know if they did the same thing or if they maybe talked and heard about these criticism from others and maybe reviewed it. I would be excited to review that. I think it might be a good option, their Thunderbolt 5 dock, and I think that's scheduled to come out fairly soon. Hopefully I'll get a chance to take a look at that one when it comes out. Anyway, hopefully you found this helpful if you're trying to decide what dock to buy, and it might be a good choice for you. And until next time, see ya.